Is it just me, or are villains more compelling than heroes? I ask this for good reason. Seemingly all the characters I find captivating are borderline evil. This is Omar Little. He makes a living by robbing drug dealers. HBO show The Wire illustrates the multitude of lives impacted by the Baltimore drug trade in the early 2000s. Omar is a product of a community diseased with addiction and violence. He learns to play the game and garners a terrifying reputation as someone who steals and murders drug dealers. In his introductory episode, Omar robs a drug house, shooting a teenager dealer in the process. Throughout the series, Omar is depicted as a ruthless killer, yet he's not the show's villain. Ask any viewer of the show, and most would hold Omar in a high regard. Audiences tend to gravitate towards characters with questionable morals. Consider other acclaimed television shows from recent decades: The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, Peaky Blinders, Game of Thrones, True Detective. These deep, rich stories utilize protagonists with blurred morals, heroes who sometimes seem to do the right things but for selfish reasons, and somehow we are drawn to them. So I ask, are villains the best heroes? If yes, then the implications are profound, because stories matter, narratives matter, morals matter. The most vital export of any superpower isn't this, or even this. It's this: culture, media. The content a population consumes is what it'll grow a taste for, and stories have been the foremost medium to spread values. During his reign, Alexander the Great carried one item on all of his conquests. It wasn't a weapon, but rather a book, Homer's Iliad. For Alexander, it wasn't just entertainment, it was inspiration. An inspiration so significant that Alexander visited Troy itself to reenact some of the battles. When he returned, he adopted Greek culture throughout all of his empire, spreading Homer's influence far and wide. Stories like the Iliad, Mahabharata, the Odyssey, Romeo and Juliet, and Frankenstein have lasted for centuries. And as long as they are told, the values embodied in them will be passed from generation to generation. Societies during those times reflected the straightforward, clear morality conveyed by the protagonists. Consider Hercules. His depiction as a literal golden child is consistent with the values like loyalty, honesty, and perseverance preached throughout his tales. He faces overwhelming challenges, triumphs, and achieves happiness. The implied morality is self-evident, which is what makes the modern anti-hero so fascinating. The morality they convey is ambiguous, blurred, conflicted. They don't attempt to personify the godlike characteristics of the heroes before them. Instead, they rely on their flawed characteristics to reflect the complexities of the real human experience. Let's take a second and analyze the construction of an anti-hero. First, we highlight their flaws. The imperfections of anti-heroes are the heartbeat of the character. They humanize the person, giving us an opportunity to relate. Before we see his mob ties and gangster tendencies, Tony Soprano is introduced first as a depressed and suicidal man, searching for peace. His struggles are key to his character arc, and we empathize with him through his pain. Second, the character displays redeeming qualities, endearing personality traits that we can't help but admire. Omar's self-imposed morals prevent him from extending his violence to civilians. Moreover, his disregard for street rules, like not working with the police, never swayed Omar's decision. He was known for proudly doing what he believed to be correct, regardless of the repercussions. The confidence, self-belief, and high standards Omar holds himself to are the basis for the admiration he receives. Finally, convey the character's life frame, their backstory, their circumstances, their why. Behind every anti-hero is a story of injustice that makes us momentarily blink and question our morals. We may detest their actions, but the viewer will undoubtedly acknowledge some part of their reasoning. Thomas Shelby's journey illustrates the limitless potential of ambition, fueled by his fearlessness and disregard for his own personal life. His sacrifices in World War I, coupled with the blatant hypocrisies of society and the government he lost so much to protect, blur his lines of what is truly righteous. So I ask again, are villains the best heroes? If yes, is this fine? Is there any merit in having moral ambiguity? For those who feel like outcasts, flawed and imperfect, anti-heroes resonate with us. They personify the extremes of both our inner demons and our hopes in our journeys. We too face difficult decisions and deal with potentially serious ramifications. What's right and wrong isn't always clearly spelled out. It's a truth we're confronted with on a daily basis. The exceptions to this come from societal institutions. Political, religious, and familial institutions draw the borders of collective morals out of necessity. In-groups with shared identities are the foundational building blocks for any functioning population. The collective social contract created is the adherence to these social ethics, without which order is impossible. Heroes personify this functionality, acting as a proverbial punishment for those crossing the line. Conversely, anti-heroes don't adhere to these ideals, but they often uphold them indirectly. I often feel more like an anti-hero than a hero. It's clear that their flawed human experience and internal battles are relatable, but what truly resonates with me is the moral ambiguity they are forced to confront. Growing up in America as an immigrant exposed me to the tension between Western and Eastern ideals. Societal norms, especially the concept of saving face, were the bedrock in my family's Eastern culture and a point of confusion for me growing up. Families were the heartbeat of the individual in these societies. The reputation one holds is all relative to the legacy one leaves behind, not for themselves, but for their family. In comparison, the often loud pillars of individualism supporting the American dream conflicted with this cohesive reputation and all-for-one mentality imposed by my Indian identity. This tension was brought to the forefront in a conversation with my dad. We considered the story of a single mother of 3 who saves one of her children from drowning through self-sacrifice. The values he was brought up on identified the mother's actions as noble, the older generation protecting the younger. But from my perspective, I questioned the fate of the 2 children left behind. For them, the same act of self-sacrifice isn't noble, but unjust. The same experience leads to differing moralities. This same effect is demonstrated in the trolley problem. Truthfully, I don't believe there is any correct answer regardless of the options provided in any of the scenarios. Our personal reasoning behind decisions is immaterial to the consequences. We can't control how others perceive us in our actions. What seems moral from one perspective may be seen as immoral from another. Sometimes, depending on the perspective, we might find ourselves on the wrong side of morality. This conundrum defines the often forgotten subjectivity that morality and ethics are built from. To me, justice is just as nuanced as the number of positions that exist in any argument. The vast majority of stances, identities, and purposes contain some measure of rationality. Through our actions, knowingly or unknowingly, we may cause injustices. Whether we are receiving or giving said injustice to others, this cause and effect relationship remains constant. The only aspect we can truly control is how we navigate these decisions. Depending on the moral stance, we can sometimes find ourselves as the quote-unquote villain, which in essence is the true benefit of anti-heroes. They represent the struggle to navigate this moral ambiguity. Beneath the entertainment, these characters depict the stories of individuals just trying to live life. They are the purest versions of individuals in a meritocracy. Their desire for altruistic collective success is secondary to their quest for inner peace and self-ambition. not for the holistic desire to embody righteousness, but for the pursuit of personal fulfillment. Along the way, they will undoubtedly find themselves as villains in their own or other stories, yet they continue down their path, trusting only themselves. So, when I'm asked, are villains the best heroes? I say yes, because oftentimes we can find ourselves as the villain.